Well, once again, we hear from Peter. There he goes again. Peter, speaking his mind. Peter, speaking up. Peter, on the wrong side. Again. Jesus telling his disciples what's about to happen. Peter saying, "Good Lord, no! This shouldn't happen to you." But, we could criticize Peter. But we shouldn't, because I really believe these words were spoken out of love. I mean, here he's been Jesus all this time. Jesus is beloved. Jesus is his Lord. He just got done moments ago. If we were reading Matthew as a continuous story, it wouldn't take us a minute to get to this portion just after we would have read what we heard last week. How Peter blurted out, "Well, you are the Messiah, the anointed one, the chosen of God." And Jesus said, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of John, for no mere mortal has revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. You know this by the power of the Spirit of God. Blessed are you." And a minute later, we were reading this, Jesus is calling Peter the devil. Wow. What a turn. Rather dramatic, I would say. But, not so much so. If Peter could see this in Jesus, that he was God's Son, Peter could see this profoundly into the heart and the mind of Jesus and his mission, and that he loved Jesus so profoundly, why would he want him to suffer? Why would he want him to die? He probably is thinking, no, this can't happen. But Peter, being Peter, can't keep it inside. He just blurts it right out. "No, Lord, no, this can't happen to you." But it is Peter who then becomes the subject of this opportunity of Jesus again to teach. So he's teaching us something too. Just moments ago, again in the story, we hear how Peter's affirmation comes from God. And the Spirit is a revelation deep in his heart. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. But now, Jesus castigates Peter because he's not thinking with those eyes. He's thinking with the eyes of this world. He's thinking the way we would think when we love someone. Someone we love so dearly and so profoundly, someone we treasure. We want to hold on to them. We don't want to let them go. We don't want to see them suffer. We want to hold on to them. We want to protect them. Even when it is their divine mission. Peter doesn't realize by saying, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God," that this is what is required of the Messiah. That he be betrayed, that he suffer, that he give his life as a ransom for the many. And then in vindication of that, be raised from the dead. Peter's not seeing it with those eyes. He's reverted back, not the eyes of Peter, but the eyes of Simon. And it's those human eyes, that human attitude, that Jesus calls the stumbling block. So Peter who is called the rock. That's what Peter means. You know, a rock can do two things. It can sink outside that boat a few weeks ago. It can be the foundation rock, or it can be a stumbling block. It all depends on your perspective. All depends on what eyes you're viewing things. And Jesus is saying, when you're viewing it with the eyes of this world, you're missing the point. And so he says, if any of you would be my disciples, then you too must take up your cross and follow where I go. Now, through the centuries, it's been interpreted in many ways. Some people say it's inevitable then that if we would be disciples, we must be ready to suffer. Somehow, that suffering is on our agenda as Christians. And so that's why we walk around with dour faces. And we inflict suffering on ourselves because that makes us closer to God. Now, I don't think that's what it means at all. But we do take up the cross. If we understand what the cross is all about, if we understand that the cross for Jesus is that statement of absolute and self-giving love, about holding nothing back, about willing to love someone so utterly and so completely that you would give up everything, that essentially you would cancel your own ego, that you would cease talking about I and begin only focusing on you. For that is what Jesus did in his life. All through Jesus' life, he says that the key to life is love. To love beyond one's self. That is the way, the path to God. That, he shows us, is the way to peace. And what happens in this gospel story is that Peter stops thinking that way and begins thinking about himself. No, Lord, this can't happen to you. You see, because if this happens to you, I will lose you. Again, we begin thinking with I. I call it I disease. Not I disease, but I as an ego disease, where the ego comes first. Ego, E-G-O, where we get the word ego, means I in Latin. And so we all have I disease to a point, and the whole point of Jesus' life is to teach us to put it away, to stop putting ourselves in the center of everything, and to begin to realize that we are not the most important thing in the world. Look around you. Every commercial on television, every advertisement you see, everything you hear is about self, self-improvement, self-confidence, self-this, self-that. It's all about me, myself, and I. That is the way of the world. And that's what Jesus says Peter is thinking. You are not thinking in the ways of heaven. You are thinking in the ways of the world. You are thinking with I. No, he says, if anyone would be my disciple, you must take up your cross. Because the cross is the ultimate sign of putting away the ego. It is the way of humility. As St. Paul so lovingly says, Jesus humbled himself, but he did not deem equality with God something to be held on to or exploited, but took on human flesh, became one of us, and humbled himself even further to even death on a cross. To give up absolutely everything to demonstrate how much love God has for you. So when Jesus says, if you would be my disciple, if you would live the life that I live, then you too must take up your cross. Few of us will be called to martyrdom. Few of us will be called to suffer the pains of Jesus. Few of us will be called to give up our life physically. But all of us are called to give up our ego. All of us are called to live a life rooted in love, where day by day, moment by moment, hour by hour, we live less for ourselves and increasingly for the other. This is the way of love. This is the way of Jesus. To do less is to become a stumbling block for the mission of Christ. It's to get in the way. Jesus calls to you today, as he did to those first disciples. Will you be my disciple? Will you follow me? Will you take up your cross? How will you answer? Will you be like Peter? Good Lord, no. You see, because if you don't want Jesus to do it, you don't want to do it either. And if you want only Jesus to do it, well then, we know what that means as well. No. We need to walk alongside Jesus. We need to be with Jesus. That way we are Jesus. We are the body of Christ. We are the loving presence of God in the world. We are the Christ that Jesus has called us to be. We are the very presence of God in the world. We are what God has made us for. That is our mission. That is our calling. How will you answer that question?